I don't like saying are on the hot seat. So maybe the way we can term this, Michael, is coaches that have a lot of pressure to win now. And that's where we're going to shift gears here for today's edition of Lombardi's List, where we typically do a top 5. Today's the top 5 coaches with pressure to win now. We've talked a lot about the Dallas Cowboys and the lame duck status of Mike McCarthy, Michael, so that feels like a very good place to start. Let's talk through McCarthy.
Well, McCarthy's won 36 games in 3 years, but you never know it. I mean, a guy wins 36 games, he'd be getting contract extensions left and right. That's 12 wins a year. But McCarthy lost the worst game he could lose at home against a Green Bay team for all we think wasn't very good. A Green Bay team that barely beat Carolina. A Green Bay team that lost to Tommy DeVito on the road. The Green Bay team that lost to Tampa Bay at home. So, the team came out in that game. And in fairness to Jerry, the team looked ill-prepared. They looked like they were lethargic. The quarterback played a disastrous game. Right? They made more mistakes than they know what to do with. And so all those 36 wins got washed away. There was nothing here. So you can't go in there and say to Mike, you did a great job 3 years. I'm going to reward you. Players would look at you funny. Basically, if you did that, you would be saying to the players, it's your fault. He's a great coach. So Jerry took the opposite approach, not do anything, play for it. Now, here's what happens when you do that. And this is real important for us as a betting market, because if it doesn't go well to start in Cleveland, doesn't go well, come home against New Orleans, right? And wins don't have to be the indicator. Struggling, when it looks bad, it becomes a problem. Because what happens? A lot of teams need confidence. They need confidence. And usually the best teams get confidence in the second half of the season, right? Like what happened down the stretch of the Green Bay. They got their confidence. They got momentum, even though some people don't believe in momentum. They got that. That's important. But when you're in one of these situations like McCarthy's in, and you don't get some momentum early, it's hard.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting conversation topic probably for all these coaches that we're going to talk about on this list, Michael, is the importance of having success early. And, week 1, week 2 pressure that could be on some of these coaches.
Yeah, let's take Brian Daboll, for example. 6 games before the bye week, right? He's got his feet up on the desk. There's no one that watched Hard Knocks came away thinking that Daboll was humble. No one thought that Daboll was in command. Forget about Joe Shane for a moment. So he's got pressure on him. Now the owners put all the pressure on him because he wants the quarterback to play better. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But he took away the play calling from Kafka. He took away from Mike Kafka. So now all of a sudden, he's calling the plays himself. Right, hired a new defense coordinator, signed Brian Burns. There's expectations there. John Mara came out and said, they know what I expect. And people tell me internally within the organization that the general manager is kind of being a little bit more aloof to the coaches because he wants to evaluate them. So, look, they've got to get off to a fast start. That's why they were so good in 2021. They started fast, beat Tennessee. They had these come from behind win against Jacksonville. Now, it all fell apart in the second half of the season, and that carried over into next year. Because why? They're not very talented. You don't win 7 games in 38 attempts against the Eagles and the Giants and think you have a talented roster.
Yeah. Great first season for Daboll. Like you said, went from a 4-win team, turned it around to 9. Last year, a big step back. You pay Daniel Jones, and not only does he get hurt, but he's just not very good to begin with. The offensive line struggles. The list goes on and on. But I think just food for thought as we talk about these coaches, people at home listening or in the car listening, if you think that these coaches can turn things around and are going to win these games early in the season and get their reputation back within the organization, then maybe it's a team that you're targeting for Survivor or looking on the opposite side of that. And that's a good reminder, too, just in general. If you haven't signed up for a Circa Survivor contest or Circa Millions, you don't have to live in Las Vegas to be a part of these contests. You just got to come down for a day to sign up. And if you're able to sign up with a proxy service, you can do the the entire rest of the season through them. And Winner Circle Proxy is the preferred proxy of VSiN. They do an unbelievable job. They're in their 9th year of providing trusted proxy services to the top contest players, including the winners in both Survivor and the Million contest last year. They have a lot of exclusive events, room discounts that are included as well for the Ultimate Contest weekend coming up at the end of this month, August 22nd to 24th. WinnerCircleProxy.com. Head there now, book your appointment. Again, really, really great opportunity there to be able to play from anywhere in the country. But to get back to some of these coaches, okay, we mentioned Mike McCarthy, Brian Daboll. Let's go to Nick Sirianni now, because the Eagles got off to an unbelievable start last year on paper. 10-1 before things just completely imploded. Then we have the story that comes out last week from Jeremy Fowler and Tim McManus kind of detailing the internal dysfunction, a quote, fractured and unhealthy relationship between Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, who they signed to a contract last year. Why is Sirianni under so much pressure right now? They won a lot of games. They played in a Super Bowl the year prior. What's going on here?
Well, I think a lot of it is emotion. I mean, I think he's very emotional on game day. I think he doesn't kind of process things through. He doesn't coach the offense. He doesn't coach the defense. He didn't recognize the problem with the team last year when they got out of shape. I mean, their 2 defensive tackles, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, probably gained 100 pounds between the 2 of them. So the team was out of shape. That's why they were 1-6. The only game they won was against the Giants by 6 points. They couldn't beat anybody down the stretch. They lost to Arizona. Arizona ran the ball on them. If you're not calling plays, if you're not the play caller offensively or defensively, then you're in charge of the conditioning. And that was bad. Now, they fired their whole strength and performance coach. They've done everything to make Sirianni successful. We'll see. And when an organization does everything to make a coach successful, it really falls on his plate.
Yeah. New strength and conditioning staff, new set of coordinators with Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio in there. And you mentioned all of those losses that they had down the stretch. How about that ugly wild card round loss, 32-9 to a Baker Mayfield-led Bucs team? It wasn't pretty down the stretch. So we'll see if they can get this train back on the tracks. Everybody's favorite head coach, Robert Saleh. Yes, certainly pressure for him in year 2 of Aaron Rodgers. We mentioned this stat earlier. This organization has not had more than 7 wins since 2016. Their win total this year, 10.5. They're expected to make the playoffs and do a whole lot this year. How much pressure is on Saleh?
Yeah, I think there's all the pressure, because I think you keep asking this question all the time. And it's really a valid question, and it's a great question. What does success look like for Saleh?
Yeah.
What does that look like? Is it 10 wins at a wild card? Is it 11 wins a division and a conference championship game? You know, what does it look like? Is it a wild card win on the road in Baltimore? You know, you got a 41-year-old quarterback. Is that being successful? I don't know. I think, to me, to really judge Robert Saleh, someone has to decide what is successful. Now, I think there's no franchise who is more linked to the election than the Jets, because if Woody has to go back to Ireland to be the ambassador because Trump wins, a lot of people in the Jets are going to breathe a sigh of relief. If Trump loses, a lot of people in the Jets are going to be in trouble.
That's an interesting perspective. It's been a mess for the Jets for a while. Longest active playoff drought in U.S. professional sports right now, 13 straight years. We'll see what they're able to do this season. Closing things out with a coach that I would say, Michael, I don't think it has been on a ton of people's radar from this standpoint. Doug Pederson with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He takes over after all of the madness that was the Urban Meyer situation. Felt like he finally got the most out of Trevor Lawrence. Last year, still a 9-8 season. But when you start the season 8-3 and only win 1 the rest of the way, that's when things become problematic. Yeah, they did deal with some injuries. Trevor Lawrence obviously had his injuries. But with Doug Pederson having a lot of pressure, why do you feel that way for him?
Well, because I think they teased everybody with a playoff win against the Rams and then having a great start. I think they want to see results. And this isn't from me. This is from their owner. Read his quote. Yeah. At the end of this minicamp. But he has great expectations for this team. He's tired of losing. They're the losingest franchise in the history, right? He's tired of losing. He's tired of signing free agents and then 2 years later cut them. So to me, he's just kind of like, you know, look, I do think there is a Belichickian effect out there, because what you're saying here is, you know, you're going to get to a point where maybe not happen this year, because we know the Super Bowl winning champion Falcons didn't see it this way. But you're going to ask yourself the question, are we better off with Bill or are we better off with someone else? That question is going to get asked a lot in a lot of buildings.
I love that you brought up the Shad Khan of it all, because he did put this staff on notice. He called the back end of last season, quote, organizational failure, said winning now is the expectation. As a staff, they do need to focus more on player development. I think he called it an addiction to free agents. And so signing guys like Trevor Lawrence, re-signing Trevor Lawrence, re-signing Josh Allen. Those were big steps that they actually re-signed guys that they drafted highly, because that's something that hasn't really happened for the last decade. 9-8 back-to-back seasons. How many wins? What's the range for them this year, you think?
I think they got to win the North. I think if they don't win the North, why shouldn't they win the North? I mean, they got to close the gap. They paid their quarterback. They've got a Super Bowl winning coach. They hired a new defensive staff. I think the results have got to show up.
They were, of course, an odds-on favorite to win the division last year. This year, that is a role that is given to the Texans at plus 105 as a favorite there.